Hello, thank you for coming tonight. I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Alyssa Pizarski. I'm the Community Engagement Services Manager here at the Waukesha Public Library. Thank you for coming. We're very excited to host this candidate forum, so we appreciate you coming out on this gloomy day. A few housekeeping pieces. If anyone needs to step out, use the restroom. If you're not familiar with our building, if you go out the door and walk straight ahead, the restrooms will be on your right. Just past the green wall. Please help yourself to some water, some coffee if you're thirsty. And the event is being recorded tonight. The League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County will be posting that later on. So just to make you aware, the event is being recorded. And with that, I'll pass it off to Kay. Thank you. We are shortening it a little bit tonight. Instead of going until 8, we are planning on ending the forum at about 7:45 with 3 candidates that we thought that would be plenty of time, as well as to make time for anyone who wanted to see the president's remarks to Congress this evening.
Thank you. Welcome to the Candidates Forum for the Waukesha School Board, sponsored by the Waukesha Public Library. My name is Kay Vance. I will be your forum moderator. I am joined by other volunteers from the League of Women Voters, Milwaukee County, and from the Waukesha Library who will help run tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County is a nonprofit, nonpartisan grassroots organization that promotes informed and active participation in government. As a nonpartisan group, the League never endorses a political party or a candidate. A healthy democracy relies on engaged citizens. So we thank you for taking the time to come in this wonderful weather and learn about the candidates. Election day is April 1st, and with proper documentation, you may still register when you go to vote. Early voting locations and dates are available, and you may want to call your local clerk for the times and dates that you can early vote. You may request absentee ballots online at the state-run website, which has a lot of information on it. It's called myvote.wi.gov. We have information on how to register to vote and photo ID requirements at the table near the entrance. I think it's right outside that door. And if you have questions for tonight's forum, please write it on the cards being distributed and pass it to one of the volunteers. You just hold it up. Questions were also solicited via an online form. Every question will go to all the candidates, and we will focus on questions pertinent to the elected office. Our question sorters will be marking duplicate questions, which are very common, sorting by category, and may write on the cards to combine questions, to reword for brevity, or just to improve legibility. We ask that the audience refrain from cheering or other demonstrations in support of or against any of the candidates. Please also refrain from any distracting activities, including the use of any electronic devices. So again, phones off. Today's candidate forum will be recorded and will be available, I am not exactly sure what site. I believe the League of Women Voters site. I'm not sure though. All 6 candidates were invited to this forum tonight. The 6 candidates are Angelique Byrne, Samuel Ndemako, Stephanie Fidland, Natalie Gren, Thomas Harlan, and Carrie Kozlowski. It is for an election to 3 seats on the school board. So joining us tonight are Angelique Byrne, Samuel Ndemako, Ndemako, am I butchering your name? Ndemiko, thank you. And Stephanie Fidlin, okay. The candidates, it's okay for me to address them by their first names. I have asked, and that's okay. And we will begin with 90-second opening statements from the candidates, followed by questions with 2 minutes allowed for each answer and 3-minute closing remarks. The candidates drew numbers to determine the order of speaking, and the order of first response to a question will rotate among the candidates. Our timers will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when you must stop. With the audience and the candidates honoring the guidelines of the forum, we still make the best use of the time and this forum opportunity. So if you're finishing a sentence, you could finish the sentence. Okay, we're going to begin with opening statements in 90 seconds or less. Tell us why you are running for office. Again, our timer will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Hi, first I just want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Waukesha Public Library for hosting us tonight and for all of you for coming. My name is Angelique Byrne. I am running for school board. I am an educator myself. I've been an educator for over 20 years. I spent a large portion of my time at the Kettle Moraine School District, helping build some innovative programs there. I currently work as an instructional coach at the Velar Phillips School in the Juvenile Justice Center. So I'm working with some of our most marginalized students. I spent a small time working in Waukesha, and what I saw when I was there was that some of the innovation that I was used to in nearby districts was lacking here. I was working really hard there to prepare students for future jobs, really preparing them for skills such as collaboration and communication. And here, I didn't feel that same push or urgency to make sure we were preparing our students for those life skills. So I would love to see Waukesha expand beyond what we're doing with academics already and build on that and work with the local colleges, trade programs, and employers, and really think about what can we do to prepare kids so we have really great future leaders, employers, and people to take care of us.
Well, first off, thank you to the League of Women Voters and Kay for moderating this event and the Public Library for allowing us to hold this event here. My name is Samuel D'Amico. I was a student of this district for 13 years, and I'm running for school board to be a voice and a representative for students on our school board. I feel that far too often in education, the one perspective that is overlooked is the whole reason why we're here, the student. And I've been educated in this district using the same curriculum, the same support tools, the same resources, the same safety drills, the same standardized testing that we currently implement for our students, which is why I do believe I am the most qualified candidate to represent our students and their needs and to move our district forward on the challenges we face and the opportunities that we could take advantage of in the next 3 years. Thank you.
Well, I echo, I'm appreciative to the League of Women Voters and the Waukesha Public Library for organizing this event and inviting us. Thank you. My name is Stephanie Fidlin, and I'm running for Waukesha School Board. I ran last year, and I'm running again because my beliefs have not changed. I am a mom with 3 kids in this district. I have 2 at Summit View and 1 at Butler. And for a long time, I have supported the work of education for my kids through PTO. And it became apparent a few years ago that though our school was doing very well and the culture and the climate and the teachers were happy and we were doing things to support students and fundraising to offer all those resources and fill in those gaps, that wasn't true of all the schools in the district. And so I realized that I probably needed to take it a step further and step up to make a difference in the whole district. And that for me looked like running for school board. In that time, I've also served currently as the Butler Principals Advisory Committee representative, and I also serve on the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. So I feel like I'm advocating for our schools and I'm speaking up in the areas that I can, but I know that being on the board is a way that I can help change policy and represent all the families in our district.
Thank you. Now we're going to begin the question part of this forum. And we'll begin with questions submitted by constituents. The timer will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when you must stop. We will begin with Samuel. 90 seconds. Okay. 2-minute responses. I apologize. So you have 2 minutes to respond, and Samuel gets the first question, which is, what is your long-term, and in parentheses, the writer said 10 years, strategic plan for the future of our schools? Enrollment is decreasing, and as a parent, this parent would like to know the plan in advance. How will you include the community in developing these plans?
So a few months ago, the Waukesha School Board took away our personalized learning programs that are at middle school, our middle school levels. So Les Paul, Horning Middle School, and Central had 3 personalized learning programs that invited hundreds of students into our district for education opportunities that suited their needs and their wishes and their long-term goals. And we've been going through declining unenrollment rates for the better part of a decade. And I think that this was just one of several decisions made by this current school board that has only made this problem worse. And so, number one, what would start that long-term plan is that I would work to find ways to implement back either the plans that we took away, the personalized learning programs, or find a way to implement new ones at our middle school level so we can bring back personalized learning to our middle school level, something that encouraged so many families to come from other districts back into Waukesha. And now what we're seeing is the exact opposite happening. The more and more reasons we're giving families to leave, they're taking those reasons and they are leaving. Number two, we can work with our elementary schools and we can provide full-time daycare to families that they're going to other districts that already do provide that. Other districts that are neighboring Waukesha right now are providing these benefits to families that we could be as well. And number three, we're going into this long-term declining enrollment problem that also 2, 3, 4 years ago came along with so many teachers, especially first-year teachers, leaving our district because they did not feel that they were being supported or appreciated. And that would be the first step that we can bring staff into the implementation plan as well.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. What is your long-term, 10 years, strategic plan for the future of our schools? Enrollment is decreasing, and as a parent, this parent would like to know the plan in advance. How will you include the community in developing this plan?
So yes, enrollment is declining, and that's true of schools across the board with birth rates declining. And you'll hear people say that, and that is true. But other districts are doing a better job of stopping the bleed. We're losing a lot of students who are open enrolling to other districts or choicing out to higher performing schools because Waukesha schools are the lowest performing schools in Waukesha County, and they only have one kid and one shot at him. So what we need to do first is strengthen the academic performance of the schools. You want the strongest opportunities for your kids, and that's going to be in our schools if we put the resources into it and make it a strong choice. The other thing that we can do is expand for full day 4K. Right now we have a limited number of sections of full day 4K. If we can increase those, families will start in our district and stay in our district. Right now they're choosing to go to other places like Mill Creek that have full day 4K. The kids get in 4K and they say, this is a good place, and then they continue on there. And then we've lost kids to open enrollment to a different school. So those are a couple things we can do. Another thing that I would like to see is offering more opportunities like we have the STEM middle school, as well as the Academy of Healthcare and Engineering at South. We could build upon things like that and offer more programming choices like that within our district to try to keep kids in the district so that we, again, stop that bleed of losing families to other schools.
First of all, I think the key in that question is how do we include the community? Compared to other districts around and the ones that I've worked in, we do a really poor job here in Waukesha of reaching out to the community, finding what the community values, what the community would like for their children if their children are school aged, and then using that to help us plan. I work in TOSA and like all districts. We also have a declining enrollment. And what they did in their first round of research is they told parents, we're looking at closing elementary schools, but we want your feedback. What they found was that community did not want to close elementary schools. So they shifted based on their community response, and they're looking at a K-6, 7, 12 model. I'm not saying that's what we should do here in Waukesha, but what I am saying is that we should be listening to our community. So if we had a similar response, I think what the district should be doing is coming back and looking at, here's what our community is asking for. How can we either meet people part way, or how can we find ways to make that happen? So I think building out that 10-year strategic plan starts with the community. And some of that community is also business owners, right? What are you seeing from your employees? Where do we have room to improve, and how can we also bring that in? And then work with the community to build that out. But I agree, if we can have more innovative programming, the charter school I worked in at Kettle Moraine, I know 44% of their students are open enrolled. I also know a large portion of those students come from Waukesha, because those families are seeking that innovation that they're not finding here. So I think we need to get away from a one-size-fits-all, start with a great curriculum, but then build out those other innovative things we can do to attract and retain families.
Stephanie, you start with this question. How would you ensure transparency regarding school board actions?
I think there's a lot we could do to increase transparency for school board actions. The district used to do a survey of the community, and that's kind of gone by the wayside in the last few years. So I think we could bring the survey back and obviously make the results of that public. I mean, you wouldn't have like the identities of the individual respondents, but just the results of the general survey. Also, the board docs website is very clunky and hard to use. The meetings are recorded and posted to YouTube. There's just different ways that we can make it more accessible to the community, because unfortunately there's a lot of times where there's things that need to be coming up on the agenda, and the community is not aware of it until a few days before the meeting. So it's hard to plan and prepare for if you want to go and speak out at that. And so I just feel like there could be a lot more done to make it more open, more transparent of what's coming, so that family members, so that we're getting that feedback proactively, as opposed to here it is on the agenda and now come and either complain about it or, raise a stink or whatever. I just think that it's something where if we were more proactive with reaching out and getting that feedback, then it wouldn't be reactive, where it's like it's on the agenda now and everybody wants to, be upset about it.
I think one of the things that we could do is find ways to get the information out to the community in ways that are packaged so we know it's there and we understand it. In Tosa, where I work, I get an email that goes out to the community before every board meeting, and it bullet points all the things. It has all the links. It's very easy for me to know what's happening there, as well as when I worked in Kettle Moraine, they had robust presentations that often came from administrators, from people at the district office, with great visuals that I felt like as an employee, I could really follow and understand. Here in Waukesha, I watch the meetings, I watch committee meetings, and it feels like we're mining information. So I think the more we can find ways to put that on the table for everyone, because then if our community knows what's happening, they can ask the right questions. They can come and give us more information. I also agree we should be surveying. Most communities do those surveys, and then they use those surveys to create their goals versus creating goals kind of in isolation. I also think we should be finding ways to get more parent input. Your students are with us at schools for more time than often they're at home with you. So I think trying to find ways to build that partnership. And there's many ways that can be done within the district. It could look similar to things that have happened in the past with parent groups at schools or at the district level, but I think they also need to be accessible. Some of those parent groups that were started happened only during the workday, and a lot of our parents work, so finding ways for there to be an evening option and a daytime option, so we're really making sure we're getting that info. And I also think from students too, that there's a give and take with all parts of our community.
I think the answer really does come down to the one word of transparency. giving your community information that they don't have to ask for. I do not think that when we watch school board meetings or we go to the school board meeting or you want to know what's happening in your district, you should even have to ask for the information that would make you informed on these issues. And there's so much information about what our school board is doing or what our school board has done or our budget or name any issue that the school board's responsible for that that parents don't even know they could get access to. And when you want access to it, you have to go through the board clerk and then submit an open records request, and then open records request could take almost 9 months to get you that information that they honestly could give you in about 30 seconds in an email. So I think the first problem is transparency and communication before we even have to ask for it. Number two, I think Stephanie hit the nail on the head when we should be a proactive board and reaching out to our community instead of reacting to the feedback we get. We should be proactive in listening to what the community wants and reactive in doing what the community wants. And, we can't agree that the community is going to agree with us all the time, but we can agree to listen to our community and bring them into the discussion. And I would say, just on the topic of transparency, there are 6 candidates in this race, and it's very telling that there are only 3 in this room.
Angelique, you are first on this question, and it is, what do you plan to do to attract and retain high-quality teachers and administrators?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We had 2 really poor years recently where we lost a lot of teachers here. And a lot of those teachers worked in both the different elective areas, such as music and the arts, and in special ed. I think when we right now you'll hear a lot about the value for your dollar. We have a very low mill rate, but also some of that squeezes teachers. And if you talk to our music teachers, what used to be 2 full-time jobs is now 1. If you talk to our special ed teachers, they will tell you the same thing. They're spread very, very thin. So I think first we have to listen to our teachers and find out, what does their workload look like? What does their day-to-day look like? Where are they struggling? And are there things we can do? We know budgets are tough. Our state funding for schools is not where it needs to be, and there'll be hard decisions that have to be made. But I think that first step is making sure that we're meeting teachers' needs so they're not going to another district or often leaving the profession. And that's not unique just to here, but it's a known issue that I think as board members, we want to be proactive in asking those questions and then seeing how we can help. We know that there's things that are difficult, teachers who travel between buildings. We had a year where we lost about 3 times as many special ed aides as we had before. So trying to address those things first to help. We know that pay and benefits only go so far if your quality of life is suffering because you are bringing so much work home or your stress level is so high. So I think it starts there with our teachers' input, and then we've come up with the solutions.
Neil?
So the solution to this issue is multifaceted, because while the first step is that, yes, we have to bring teachers into the conversation, and every single thing that we pass has to take them and their profession into account, because we cannot keep passing or implement curriculum without thinking about who has to implement that curriculum. And we also cannot keep worrying about the budget challenges we have in our schools and our classroom if we're not worrying about the teachers that have to go into those classrooms and teach. And so from everything from our budget challenge to our curriculum, when we look at schools, rumors of schools being closing or Whittier being closed, these are classrooms that we're taking away, and these are schools that we're consolidating. And teachers have to pick up the remnants of higher class sizes and higher workloads. And then when you look at the curriculum, we just passed 2 new curriculums for our AP classes, and we're trying right now to implement a new literacy curriculum that was handed down by our state legislature. And there has been not one single discussion on how we train our teachers to implement that curriculum, or even what the worry would be of them having to learn a new curriculum during the 3 months of their summer. And so, yes, we need to worry about what our teachers' needs are. We need to bring them into the conversation, and we need to make sure that every single decision, whether it's about curriculum or about students or about teachers, brings everyone into the solution instead of esoteric decisions that are only narrowed on one group of people.
Okay, Stephanie.
I think that, retaining teachers is like, any place that you work. You want to feel valued, you want to feel heard, you want to have the resources that you need to do a good job. So I think we can start there. Another thing that we can do is, my brain just went blank. Sorry. Can you just read the question one more time? I'm so sorry.
Plan to do to attract and retain high-quality teachers and administrators?
Yes. Okay. So we can, survey the staff, and I'm so sorry. I just totally.
About the babies.
It's something.
It clicks in if you've ever been a mom. You feel like you should do something. So,
But I think that we want to listen to the teachers. We want to attract teachers and retain teachers. And one of the biggest things that we did was take away teacher autonomy. So as we implement this new curriculum, we wanted to keep everybody in lockstep pace. We took away a lot of teacher autonomy. We have teachers with a lot of professional experience, and we want to be able to tap into that. So when a teacher is teaching, sometimes currently they just have to kind of teach to the middle. And when I ask the question, what happens when you have a higher performing kid? How do you make sure that they're getting what they need to go deeper? And they said, well, there's things on the iPad that they can explore on their own. And so then, well, how do you help the kids that are struggling? Well, the teachers, they'll just have to kind of, teach to the middle and bring the ones up, and then also encourage the other ones to go deeper. I'm a nurse. I don't know how you can take care of patients in the middle, plus patients that are really sick, plus patients that, it's a lot for a teacher to do. And so I think we're asking a lot. And then when you consider the fact that they had mentioned that the biggest cost that they have is staffing, and they're struggling to overcome this deficit in the budget. They said that what their plan would be to reduce staff and close sections and reduce staff. So then you're going to have larger class sizes, and you're going to have teachers with even more students in their classes.
Samuel, you get the next question, going first, and it is, do you think high schools should have counselors and college advisors? If so, how would you assure that they receive adequate funding?
So yes, I absolutely think that is important. Number one reason is that right now we have 45% of our high school students that are graduating unprepared for college. They are graduating having to take classes in college that they should have been able to take in high school. We have 45% of our students right now district-wide that cannot grade at grade level at all. They cannot pass a standardized test in science, math, social studies, reading, or writing. So yes, we need as much help as we can get on our high school level, especially helping students become college and career ready. And when we have, going back to budgetary challenges, that's going to be a big theme tonight. When we go back to budgetary challenges, there are some things that we're going to have to prioritize. And when we're implementing curriculum and we're focusing on staffing our special education department, and we have the challenge of 45% of our students graduating unprepared to go to college or unprepared to graduate college once they get there, that is going to have to be a budget priority of ours to get a handle on that if we want to educate the next generation of workers and the next generation of leaders in our city.
I think literacy is something we really have to focus on. That's something that we're losing kids at the very beginning with literacy skills lagging throughout the district. And so then it's a building block thing, and it's getting harder as we go. So building into strong literacy skills from the beginning and then continuing to develop those as kids go along. We also just need more opportunities as far as like expanding higher level math courses so that when kids are getting into those college years that they are in those AP classes, if they're on that track, The reality is, though, not every kid is going on to college. So while it is important that we do prepare kids who are pursuing college education, we also need to expand the number of pathways for kids to be career ready. And that's increasing those career ready skills, collaboration, communication, fundamental things like that. But also expanding our opportunities with like WCTC, partnering with businesses, developing apprenticeship programs and things. So because some kids will enter good paying jobs straight out of high school through those pathways. And so we need to strengthen those opportunities.
Leek? Do you think high schools should have counselors and college advisors? If so, how would you assure that they receive adequate funding?
So currently our schools have guidance counselors. That job is kind of one job. When I was at Les Paul, one of our guidance counselors also traveled over to STEM middle school where my kids went to school. And it was difficult because they were only there part-time, they were split, and they had someone different in that role all the different years my children were at STEM. So I think that the funding part has already affected our counselors. So I think it goes back to like looking at these bigger issues and really deciding where do we need to invest. So if we're seeing a trend that we need more counselors for the different needs that our students have, whether it's at the high end of high school, helping them choose those college paths, helping them apply to colleges, or in the younger years where we're just dealing with other issues, then I think we have to look at that budget and decide how do we make that happen. I don't think anything's impossible, and it will come at the cost of something else. So what is that? But if we're looking more deeply at, again, what does our community say we need? What are our educators in our buildings say we need? Then we can do a better job of making those decisions and helping with the budget. Unfortunately, there's no magic wand that brings us a bunch more money for those types of positions. But I do think we can make some tough choices and prioritize what our students need in the building every day.
Thank you. Stephanie, you go first with this question. Understanding that you have to consider standardized tests, what can the district do to build a student's critical thinking skills and core knowledge in areas such as civics, geography, science, and the arts?
I think you have to inspire kids to be lifelong learners. And that's, very pie in the sky. But I think that giving them real opportunities to have real experiences, meaningful experiences, it sparks that thing inside of them that says, I'm interested in this. And then that's something that they're going to latch onto and really want to pursue that. Sometimes it's harder. I have a kid who would rather die than do math. But, trying to understand, like, where is it for him? He likes to build things. And so it was like, okay, here's, you want to build this, we're going to use a ruler and we're going to measure. And really measurements are just kind of like fractions, so we can break this down. And it's like, it clicked for him a little bit. And so I think that we can do that for our young kids, that we can see what is it about you, what's the unique part of you, and then hook into that. And great teachers do that every day, all day. They've done it in my life. You can see them do it in classrooms every day, all day, and I've seen it with my own kids. So I think that if we can hook kids into things that are interesting to them, give them more experiences, more opportunities. And part of that is, a lot of this curriculum exists on iPads. Getting them off of the iPads, getting them back to hands-on, to real experiences where they're, getting to see how things happen and do it with their hands and do it with all their senses. I think that sparks lifelong learning. So while the apps are an important complementary piece of the curriculum, and the iPads are obviously an important piece of the technology that kind of helps bring it all together, I do think that we need to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture and see how can we bring in tactile learning experiences as well.
Malik, do you want me to repeat the question? Because it's a long one.
Yeah,
Understanding that there are standardized tests in existence, what can the district do to build a student's critical thinking skills and core knowledge in areas such as civics, geography, science, and the arts?
So I've spent most of my career working in project-based and personalized learning and interdisciplinary learning. I think if there's ways that we can tap into that, it really goes far. Not every kid wants to sit down and study all those things, right? And sometimes we think, well, if we just tell them to, they will. But what really happens in a classroom is you've got some that are super interested and go deep, and then others are like, yeah, like just let me have that worksheet, finish it off, and see you later. So I think if we can start with that base level curriculum, as an instructional coach, I can tell you it's super necessary. We need to have a sound curriculum that we start from, but then how can we build in those opportunities for kids to see, how does this relate to my life? How does this relate to a career I might have? How does this relate to a skill that I can use every day? Or maybe something I'm already doing. Like, I love video games. I'm a gamer. Like, oh, there's a whole lot of coding and math and art and all these different things that go into that career. But to do that, we need to have some flexibility in our curriculums. So right now, what we've heard from some teachers is that there's not that flexibility. It's very lockstep. And again, we need that foundation. But where do we let that flexibility happen? Or where do we let our educators build in those projects that emphasize what they just learned or the students just learned, so they then can have that deeper learning, and hopefully that's sparking those interests in careers, or that interest in lifelong learning or their own learning. I just had an experience like that with my own son. He was studying something and he totally didn't want to do it. And then all of a sudden he was like, oh, could I like make one of those aquaponics, hydroponics things? And then, at least for those 24 hours, he was excited about it. But it's something that we'll be able to come back to. And without that, I don't know that excitement would have been there. And then it's just that grueling paperwork, which is hard for my kid. So I think that's also a way to reach all learners.
Well, we have to meet kids where they're at. Every kid is going to enjoy different parts of school or prefer different subjects, or like this, it might come as a surprise. I loved civics and government. But not every kid in that class did. But there was about 25 students in that class, and not a single one of them during the entire year ever got below a B on our test, because we had a teacher who was able to meet all of us where we were at and engage us into the curriculum that probably could have been really boring. And they made it not boring. I also think that when we give our students at younger ages the ability to really decide what they want to do after they leave elementary school and after they leave middle school and after they leave high school, and they can develop their own kind of individualized plan of what education should look like for them, what that does is that makes it even easier for them to really dig deeper into these topics, because when kids know what they want to do, it excites them more to do it. And that also goes into making our curriculum flexible for what students need and what students want. If a student is really interested in math, we can make as much of the curriculum centered on math so that they can understand things in a different light than maybe other students could. We have students that really like reading or writing. We could bring in more humanities and social studies and reading and writing into other parts of the curriculum that we could have not have implemented that before. So it's really meeting kids where they're at and engaging them in the curriculum that Angelique was right, we don't really have now.
Angelique, you get the first crack at the next question, which is, what is one policy of the school board that you would work to change if elected?
Ooh, that's really specific. All right, let me think for a moment on that one. Sam's ready. Apparently he should go first. I don't know if I'm going to talk about one policy, but what I will talk about, and I just have a little visual aid for myself, is when I was working in Waukesha, there was lots of changes, and one of the things I was asked to do is hang this poster in my classroom that says, "You matter, you are respected, you belong, and you have a voice," which is a great start. But next to that is the actual board policy. The first one is, the board does not discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, ancestry. You get the point, right? It's kind of boring for students. So I think where I'd like to take that question is, like, how can we actually take these policies and make them come to light for students in a way that's really enriching them, versus like a compliance, like, I'm putting this on the board, it says you matter, and here's the policy that we're gonna, make sure to hold someone accountable to. But I think I would rather really listen to our students and families and find out, like, within this policy, what's working for you? Is there something in here that's not working for you? What we had heard in this time period, that there was a lot of issues around bullying that was happening in our schools. So I would like to be able to really listen to that and then craft policy that's going to help us really prevent the bullying versus I was told as a teacher, well, just put this up in your room, that's going to end bullying. That's not good policy, in my opinion. There were no discussions. Nobody asked me what was happening in my classroom. No one asked me how the things were affecting the students. And as an educator, that was like really disheartening to me, especially when I had students coming to me in my classroom in tears saying, I heard that the school board did this thing and I think it's gonna hurt me.
So, I don't know that there's one policy in particular, but I will say, just because, over the last 3-4 years, not many board policies all by themselves have been changed or added onto. What's changed is the culture of the school board that we have right now. What's changed is the leadership style of the school board we have now. And what's changed is the character of the school board that we have now. And so what I think really needs to change right away is that we need a school board who is going to be transparent with our community, listen to our community, respect those who disagree with them, and still talk to them in a respectful way. And a school board that's going to invite more voices that they leave out. I suppose a minor policy change is in several other communities, especially in southeastern Wisconsin, many people can go to our school board meetings and they can speak at the school board meeting and actually ask questions of our board members and get a respectful back and forth question and answer where they're actually being held accountable in public versus now you go to your school board meeting, you stand at the podium, you speak for 3 minutes, and then everything just kind of gets ignored after you step off the stage and the next speaker comes. So I suppose that would be something that I would look at to, if we're going to be serious about wanting more transparency and communication and working together with our community, is actually being transparent to them and working with them both in public and in private.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and I mean, no one policy sticks out in my mind that like this is the policy I'm campaigning on that I would want to change. But I do think, that I echo kind of what they're saying in the sense that as you review policies, I think that it's important that you're bringing all the key stakeholders in. So, as we're reviewing those policies, are we getting teacher feedback? Are we getting parent feedback? Are we getting student feedback? There are school boards that have a student representative that sits on their board. That's a major opportunity for Waukesha to have a student. They're a non-voting member, but they're a voice to speak to how would this policy affect students. And it's a great opportunity for the student themselves to get to participate in, in an experience like that and represent their school. So I think that by having those key stakeholder voices, are we asking community members, people who don't have children in the district, retired people who, the quality of the schools affects their property value? Are we getting all the voices of the community when we enact these policy changes? So I think that is kind of more important to me as opposed to changing one policy, changing the way we review policies and the way that we bring decisions, bring voices to the table to make policy change.
On this question, there is much discussion about the content of history and social science classes. As a board member, how would you address a requested change to the curriculum, such as how it addresses the Holocaust, slavery, civil rights?
So I think education, I think history should be taught as it happened, no more, no less. I think that's a very simple concept. If it happened in history, yes, we should teach our kids about it. Just 2 or 3 years ago, the state legislature, it's probably even more than that, the state legislature passed legislation on how we have to teach Holocaust history. So we would be bound by state law to do that. But I think that in other areas that, we need to teach history how it happened. And we need to teach history in a sense where we can have a discussion in the classroom about it. But the curriculum still needs to be what we can agree the history was, and not just an opinionated view one way or the other.
Stephanie?
I have the terrible mantra of if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it, which I feel like is very, very appropriate for times like this. I think that you can teach, I think you should teach history, all of history. I think that, again, you would be bound by state law and curriculum and things like that. But I do think that it's important that we learn about history so that we're not doomed to repeat it. But also because we have, critical thinkers. That's what we're trying to develop. So we're not teaching our slant or our bias of, what we perceive that historical impact. You're teaching history, and the kids can learn history. They can critically think and make up their own opinions about that history. But I think it is important to learn it. And I think that, just exposing students to more things is never bad or wrong. So, I mean, the Holocaust is a weighty subject. It's heavy. But, my kids went to Washington, D.C. this summer, and I had my third grader went to the Holocaust Museum. We didn't have to give any big speeches. He took in that history, and he formed his own opinion about those events. And so I just think that it's important that we don't hide from that. I do also think that that's part of where autonomy comes into a play. As we've developed this lockstep curriculum, there are historical events that are happening in real time right now. And if you were teaching a government class in high school, it would be amazing to be able to just review those things in real time and say, this is what happened on the news last night. Write an essay about what you learned or what you think. And we can't do that because we're taking away the autonomy, and we're saying you have to stay in this lockstep curriculum, and nope, we're not on that page, so you can't talk about that right now. And I think that's a disservice to our kids who are experiencing history in real time right now.
Angelique? Sure. There is much discussion about the content of history and other social science classes. As a board member, how would you address a requested change to the curriculum, such as how it addresses the Holocaust, slavery, and civil rights?
I'm going to start with the part of how would you address someone saying that we should change the curriculum? I think as a board, one, you have to have a protocol for that, and if there's not, one should be made. We've seen similar things maybe with library books across districts in the area, and the districts who have a really sound policy of reviewing those requests, I think do a better job addressing them because they know what they're looking for, what their process is. So I think that's number one, is to have that process. Specifically to teaching, we want to start with, there already are some laws on the books in Wisconsin. For example, one's Act 31, and that says that we do have to cover all of those things. That's part of the law that we do that. I think great teachers are intertwining current events. They're looking at things from multiple perspectives. So, I've heard things like, this district says you've got to teach both sides of the Holocaust. What does that mean? What's both sides? Well, I think you could definitely give multiple perspectives. What was the perspective of the Russians? What was the perspective of the Germans? What was the perspective from, each country during that time period? And then how do you look at what's happening now? What is the perspective of the US versus the perspective of the UK or Russia? And then you can have the students do that same critical thinking of the things happening now. I think that's something that's probably missing in our society, right? Like, we need to be able to do that, and then we also need to be able to have conversations that are different than someone that we might be in the room with. So I think avoiding those types of assignments or discussions in class isn't helping prepare kids to be able to have those discussions later.
The next question, Stephanie goes first, and it is on the top of every parent's mind. What can be done to keep our children safe? How can the district prevent gun violence and also address bullying?
The district did good work a few years ago to make secure entrances in all the buildings, and I think that was a strong investment. I do believe in school resource officers being in buildings. I think that's a valuable asset to our district. So I would work to keep those in place and strengthen those relationships that we have with those officers. They have specialized training, and they really work to develop relationships with students. And they're very adept at recognizing a student who might be kind of falling off the grid a little bit and kind of checking in with them, whether it's someone who's having trouble with absenteeism, or someone who seems like they might be struggling at home, or someone who just kind of seems like a loner and they might need someone to talk to them because they might be at risk of, possibly committing an act of violence. They're just trained to kind of recognize some of those red flags in students. And so I think that it's important that we have them in place and that we continue to support that. I think we also could do a better job of addressing bullying. I think that some of the policies that we have in place, they are very great policies, but when the issues actually come up and they affect students, sometimes it becomes very like wishy-washy with the actual what's going to happen with this now. Like, what are we going to do about this? And it's just like, well, we told them to stop doing it. So I think that we could do a better job of like the wraparound piece of what happens and, you know, what are the steps that we're going to take to make sure that those behaviors end. And I know that it's important too with, you know, as we're giving these kids electronic devices, we need to do more proactive education about what cyberbullying looks like and how important it is. You have this device in your hand, you know, making sure that they understand that this is a tool for school and that it shouldn't be abused or used for things, you know, whether it's sending abusive emails or messages to each other or pictures or things like that.
Angelique?
One thing I want to talk about is the training teachers receive for safety training, such as if there was an active shooter situation or something else that happened in the building. I feel really lucky that when I was in the Kettle Moraine School District, I was ALICE trained. If you don't know what it is, you can look it up, but it's very research-based in how they implement their training and giving teachers the autonomy to make a decision, a real-time decision with real-time information. When I came to Waukesha, they use, I believe it's We Love You Guys. Not a bad resource, but not quite as informed as a teacher. And when I was working here, I felt like, ooh, there's something that's happening and I wasn't told if this was a drill or not. And if I don't know if something's a drill, I can't make the right decision. Because when people don't know, they assume it's a drill. And if you assume it's a drill, you're just like, okay, it's probably fine. Everyone just sit down and be quiet, hide behind that desk. Won't be good. But when I was trained with ALICE training, I was always told when it was a drill. So if something came and I wasn't told ahead of time it was a drill, I knew. Take action. Listen for information. Here's where you can find information. Here's who you should trust. And I felt like I was really, really informed that if anything had ever happened, I would be the one to get to decide, do I take my kids and run out that door? Or do I sit here and hide and barricade? When I was in Waukesha, my only training was to sit and hide. I brought that to the assistant superintendent at the time because the Uvalde shooting had just happened. And the more I thought about it, like, this just doesn't sit right with me. And the reaction I got back was like, well, if something really happened, you obviously could do what you feel like you need to. But we were not trained in that. So that's something I would like to look at.
So in 2019, a student brought a gun to Waukesha South. And if it was not for the dedicated staff members that were in there on the second floor and our experienced school resource officers, that situation could have ended much worse than it did. And so I definitely agree that the biggest component of this is having a strong relation with our Waukesha Police Department and keeping school resource officers in our schools and in our community, because that keeps our schools safe and that gives a lot of students a role model to look up to and someone to talk to that's not teaching them English or math or science. I also think that on the topic of training, there were many times in my 13 years of going to Waukesha School where our teachers did not know if it was a drill or not. We did not know what the situation was, whether it was a drill or what we should even be doing until they came down on the loudspeaker and 12 minutes later told us it was a drill. Thank you, you guys did a good job. I will also say that on the bullying aspect of it, there's a lot of harassment and bullying that happens in our district that does not get reported. About 2 or 3 years ago, the last time I think the school district released this information, they gave us a very lowballed number about how many incidents happen in our schools, like 70 incidents a year, which is crazy to think that they thought that was the case. This happens every single day in our schools, across all schools, elementary school, middle school, and high school. And the single biggest problem is kids do not feel comfortable or safe reporting when this happens. They don't know who to go to. Sometimes they don't even think it was that serious, so they don't think they should tell anyone. Or when they do, nothing happens about it. And so that's where we need to start. When something happens, you tell someone, and when you tell someone, something happens.
Angelique, you go first with this question. What should the district policy be for responding to requests to ban books from the school library?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes with what I was saying earlier. I think that there should be a process in place. And I think a great part of that process should be that whoever's making that request should have had to have read the book first. Too often there's people who find something on the internet, there's some, buzz list going around, and all of a sudden someone's asking the school district to remove 100 books. When you take things out of context, right, a couple sentences, sometimes it can sound alarming. But if you read the whole book and you, especially at like the high school level, and you realize like, oh, there are some adult themes in this book, but also these students are going to be adults soon. And actually, coming from a teacher myself, some of these kids are experiencing these adult themes already in their life. And so we need to make sure that we know that it's in context. I think another next step would be to have a committee that's reviewing that goes beyond the reach of just the board and administrators. I can't remember which district, but there was a district in Wisconsin that did that, and they formed a committee including some community members. And the people on that committee read that book, and then they met and they talked about it. And I think that's really important because you're going to have people with really extreme viewpoints on either side. And I think it's really important we're coming to the middle. So having that process be part of the community, I think is a good first step. And then from there, there's guidelines from the different library associations. So there's some things that we could then use to help us see, are we making a good decision here, that we're not going too far one way or the other.
So I think this should be handled on a case-by-case basis, where if someone really does have a problem with one of our books, we can review it, either the school board or make another group of people to do so. But it should be on a very case-by-case basis, really deciding whether this book is too outside of the scope of the curriculum, too disruptive, or what other problems that they may have with it. But to really touch on Angelique's point, when she said that a lot of these books aren't inappropriate, but they have adult themes in them that a lot of students are already facing. About 2 or 3 years ago, a parent came to our school board meeting and wanted to talk about a book that wasn't graphic in nature, but it described the sexual assault of someone who wrote a biography. And, according to Marquette University, about 40% of women under the age of 35 have been assaulted or harassed in some way. And to tell a high schooler that you cannot read a book that mentions that is a real thing is a very disturbing thing to hear. And so that's one of those cases where there is a difference between an explicit and graphic and inappropriate book and a book that touches on uncomfortable subjects.
I agree. I think that as you look at developing a policy for reviewing books, I think that it is important that it goes beyond just the members of the school board. It needs to include teachers, it needs to include parents, ideally including students and community members, because everybody will have multiple perspectives, and it's important that we are truly reviewing the material and then developing criteria, because I agree that there is a difference between, what is the criteria of this is a book that doesn't belong in school versus this is just an uncomfortable topic, but in context, it's something that, that we can have students reading. I think that, again, if you're challenging young people to become critical thinkers, lifelong learners, they're going to read books that make them uncomfortable. They're going to read books that bring up sensitive topics. If they walk out in the world and they've got a smartphone in their pocket, they've got access to the worst of the worst already. So there's nothing you're going to find in a book in our schools that's worse than what they probably have access to on their cell phone. So we do still need guardrails. We do still need policy, and we need to do that in a common sense way. But I think that it can't just be one parent coming in and reading a salacious sentence out of a book and then we say, well, we're just going to ban that book. I think that we need to be conscientious and thoughtful about how we do it, and we need to bring more people into the conversation than just the school board.
Okay, we have time for one more question. And the person who starts first is Angelique. It's a long question, so I may have to repeat it. In 2023, the district passed the Parental Rights and Transparency Resolution. How would you address this resolution? Do you think schools can navigate the concerns the resolution addresses and also support the students who may feel marginalized?
Yeah, so I think it's important to think about that as it's a resolution, it's not policy. So I think that's the first thing for us to think about if you've read it. If you haven't, I would recommend it. I think it's really important that when we're thinking about doing things like that, we are thinking about our whole community and that we're not creating things that are, I don't know, like it feels a little bit like for show, right? It's not policy. It's a resolution that was put out that mirrors one that was put into legislation in Wisconsin and was vetoed. So I think we have to be careful that we're not taking things that are political on one end or the other and then putting it for show for the district and saying this is what guides us. Instead, we need to be thinking about, again, what does our community really say? We need to be local, right? Here in Waukesha. When I knocked on doors, some people asked me about some things, and I said, can you tell me where that happened in Waukesha? And I would get responses like, oh, well, I think I maybe heard that happened in California, or things like that. So I think if there's issues happening here, then we talk about them. Then we do make policy if we need some kind of resolution. But it should start there. And if we're really talking and listening to our community, our students, our teachers, we will uncover the things that need to be talked about instead of things that are big national political talking points. I think the further we can get away from that, the more we're going to serve our students. And some of those people that were maybe mentioned in that resolution, if we're talking to their families, talking to them and finding out what is happening at school, what can we do to come together to make sure that school's a good place for you to learn, right? That's what we're here for, and that's what should be our starting point.
Okay, Stephanie?
My main issue with the parental rights resolution is that it only seems to support certain parentals' rights and certain parentals' viewpoints. I think that beyond parental rights, the bigger conversation is parental engagement. How can we get parents involved and plugged into the schools and close the loop of collaboration between families and students and teachers? I think that as we look at students being marginalized, for some students, school is the only place that they feel like they can truly be themselves and they feel like home isn't a safe place for them. I don't think it's the school's job to box out the families. It's the school's job to engage and loop those families in and see how can we, because ultimately school is school. Your family is your family. Your family is where you're from. So again, how can we engage families and bring it back together? Because we know that that learner is at home and we want that to be a safe place at home as well. You know, school's been tasked with the burden of, you know, making sure kids are not going hungry, making sure that kids are getting an education. For some kids, you know, social workers are recognizing that maybe this kid's no one's taking care of them, their clothes aren't being cleaned. Schools become this big safety net. But mental health is part of their whole being. And for some of the kids, you can tell the mental health is suffering as well. And you can't isolate and do everything in a box at school. You have to loop the parents back in. So parental rights is one thing, but I would like to really build upon parental engagement.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I don't disagree with the idea of parental rights. I don't know anyone that does. I don't know anyone that says that parents shouldn't have rights or shouldn't have the ability to, you know, take a large role of their children's education. I don't know that that's ever been disagreed with. But my main issue of the parental rights resolution was two things. One, it was not a policy. It was exactly that, a resolution. Basically, we put out a Post-it note, we like parents' rights. That's what it was. But one of the things that was in the parental rights resolution was that we are going to lobby the state legislature to pass this statewide. And even a conservative board member, Cory Montillo, raised his hand and said, when have we ever lobbied the state government to do something policy-wise. Evan voted for it anyway, but irregardless. And that really does touch on the big point. One, the school board is not tasked with lobbying politicians in the state legislature to pass social policy. So that should not have been in the resolution. That was the reason I opposed it. But number two, it didn't do anything. All it did was reaffirm what everybody does agree with in some way, that yes, parents do have rights, and parents do have voices, and parents have the ability to control what happens with their child. But that still brings into the larger conversation, how do we engage these parents, as Stephanie said, and how do we make this community, well, not make this community, but have this community work together instead of against each other and against this group of people, teachers versus parents, students versus admin, the district versus our community. How can we work together?
Okay. Now we're going to start with closing remarks. There's one question we received late that you might want to just answer in your closing remarks. The closing remarks are 3 minutes. The question submitted is an interesting one. What novel most impacted you when you were a student? That's a softball question there. And you each have 3 minutes for your closing remarks, and we're going to begin with the same order we did the opening. So, Angelique?
All right, sorry, it got me thinking about this novel question. Well, first I'll just say that school was not my favorite place. I was a bit of a struggling learner, and now as a coach, I think I probably had some like ADHD tendencies that I now have some really good strategies for. But in school, there's often kind of like a tracking system, like these kids get to take these classes and these kids get to take these ones. I was kind of like over here. And I remember watching some of my friends taking like honors or AP English. And I was like, gosh, why do they get to read all the good books? And I felt like my books were boring. But I remember senior year, we read, maybe it was junior year, I don't know. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. And it was such an impactful book. And I was like, oh my gosh, if people were giving me books like this, I would have liked English class. So for me, that was really impactful in school. It changed my thought process around reading. It's like, oh, maybe I want to read more books. And now I read all the time. As far as closing statements go, the reason I'm running for school board is I really care about public schools. And I think with declining enrollment, some of the things we've talked about here today, we just really need people on the school board that are going to champion public schools. We have people on the school board who have actively spoke at school choice events, who are posting a Happy School Choice Week. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong if that's what you believe in, right? But I don't think that then the place on the board is a place to be using that seat to advocate for the things that maybe aren't helping our funding in public schools. I want to be on the board to advocate for the things that are going to help our kids. Right now, we are getting, as public schools, 30 cents on the dollar for special ed funding, where private schools and choice schools and charter schools are getting 90%, so 90 cents on the dollar. So if I'm going to advocate for something as someone on the school board, I'm going to advocate for things that are going to help me here. I'm not going to be publicly advocating for things that maybe are taking funding away from our schools. So I think those are just important things. Like who is your champion for public schools? Who is here to help every kid? I think that's why I've gravitated towards the Velar Phillips School with students who are incarcerated. Like those kids need a champion. And if you don't have champions for kids like that in schools every single day, unfortunately, I see what happens to those kids. So we are the bridge in education to the community, and I really want to make that bridge stronger. So we are working with the community. We're thinking about all those kids, and we're figuring out how we can make it work for everybody. So all of our kids are taking care of us later. That's my goal, that when I go to the doctor, I'm like, oh, that's the kid I want to be my doctor.
Okay. I don't remember who wrote it, but there's this book I read about 4 or 5 years ago called A Change in Miracles, which basically just touches on how there's a lot of things in your life you can change just based off of how you think about it, and how just your perception and your perspective on things can really change your behavior and your mindset. So that's what I would start with. For my closing statements, when I'm out knocking on doors and talking to a lot of voters in our community, I hear two things. Two big questions. One, I didn't know we had a school board. What is that? And two, I don't have kids in the district. Why should I care about this election? And that's a popular one. And you know, there are a few reasons why you really should. Number one, you know, above just what we do on the school board to affect district policy and what we can change in the classroom, school board's responsible for two main things: managing our district budget and levying your property taxes. So if you own your home, or even you rent your home, because that's going to get factored into your rent, this election is about property taxes and local taxes. Number two, we have an ongoing structural budget deficit, which in one of the projections of the 2 or 3 that our district CFO put out said could lead us down the road possibly to bankruptcy in the next 5 years. And our board doesn't say anything about it. And that is going to affect everything from property values back to property taxes, the possibility of referendum, the possibility of future school closures, the possibility of shrinking class sizes, losing teachers to other districts, causing more and more students to continue to leave the district and make the problem that we already have right now worse. This election matters so much, whether you have kids in the district or you don't, whether you own your home or you don't, whether you work at a Waukesha business or you don't. This election is going to, in some part, influence major parts of our communities, because we know that stronger schools are going to build stronger communities, and we are trying to build stronger schools and build stronger leaders for the next generation. So thank you.
Well, the book that made the biggest, well, I guess it just hit me at a time, The Diary of Anne Frank. I had just gotten my first diary. I was in 3rd grade, and we were reading that book, and I remember like thinking I should write my diary with some important historical facts and things, because someday somebody might read this, and you know, this could be really important. But I also remember reading that book and thinking, if I was Anne, or if I was someone in Anne's community, what would I be doing? Would I have fought back? Would I have stood up? Would I have been too scared? What would it have been like for me? And when I think about that in this moment, that's why I'm running for that's why I'm running for Waukesha School Board, because public schools are in a moment of crisis. We're at a critical tipping point for public schools, and I think I would have been one of the people that would have stood up and fought, and that's why I'm running. We have my 3 most important reasons are at home packing their lunch, but we have so many kids in this community counting on all of you and every one of us to make stronger public schools. If you don't have kids in the district, if your kids are long graduated, it matters. It matters so much. It matters for selfish reasons like your property values and things like that, and the resale value of your home, and keeping your taxes low and avoiding going to huge multi-million-dollar referendums. All of that matters for sure. But long-term, big picture, it matters, because these are the kids that are going to be members of our community. They're going to take care of you at the hospital. They're going to change the oil in your car. They're going to be members of our community, and we want them to be good members of our community, upstanding members of our community. We want them homegrown right here. And so that's why I'm running, because I want our schools to be the greatest opportunity that they have to be good moms, good dads, good employees, good members of the community, strong citizens who know the importance of being a citizen in their community and building it to the next generation. So that's why I'm asking for your vote on April 1st. And I just appreciate you being here because it shows that you care and that you're taking this very seriously. But I think the biggest ask that I would take away from tonight is you learned a lot about us, and you've probably made some choices. Go and tell 10 people around you why this election is important. People will be turning out for the top of the ballot because our state Supreme Court justice is an important election. But every office down the ballot also matters, because your local government has a huge impact on what happens right here in Waukesha. No more than your Waukesha School Board, because it's going to impact the schools. So tell 10 people that don't normally talk to you, or that are your close friends that live around you, why they need to care about this, why they need to look into it, and they need to make an informed decision, and they need to vote all the way down the ballot because it matters.
Thank you. This is the closing of our forum, and the League reminds you that our democracy depends on citizen involvement. The typical turnout for a spring election is only 30% of eligible voters. The turnout among registered voters in Waukesha County in April 2024 was just under 40%. I trust that you all intend to vote on April 1st, and I thank you all for showing up on this just wonderful night and making it to a really good candidate forum. And I thank you to the candidates who put the time and effort into running for this office. I hope that you will increase voter turnout by encouraging your friends and family and anybody you know to vote on behalf, as long as they're qualified to vote. On behalf of the Waukesha Public Library and the League of Women Voters, thank you for running for political office, for attending this forum, and for participating. And thank you to all of you for attending, and go out and vote. Thank you.